The champagne glass slipped from Amanda's manicured fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the 42nd floor conference room. Her CEO, Michael Sterling, stood frozen mid-sentence, his confident presentation voice trailing off as he stared at me in complete disbelief. The room full of Sterling Marketing Group's top executives fell into stunned silence, their eyes darting between Amanda's pale face and my calm expression. "You're telling me," Michael finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper, "that Maya Rodriguez, the woman Amanda always talks about living in that tiny Chinatown apartment, is the actual owner of this entire building?" I nodded simply, watching as the color drained completely from my sister's face. Just moments before, she had been laughing with her colleagues about my adorable little studio and how I was still figuring things out at 28. Now the PowerPoint slide glowing behind Michael displayed the building ownership records he'd pulled up to impress potential clients, showing Rodriguez Towers' registered owner as M. Rodriguez Holdings LLC. Sometimes, the most satisfying moments aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones where the truth finally speaks for itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in my 450 square foot studio apartment in Chinatown. Sunlight filtered through the single window overlooking Grant Avenue, casting long shadows across my deliberately modest furnishings. I sat cross-legged on my simple IKEA bed, laptop balanced on my knees, reviewing the quarterly reports from my property management company. The numbers were exceptional, as they had been for the past 3 years since I'd really hit my stride in commercial real estate. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Company celebration tonight at our offices. Sterling just landed the biggest client in our history. Family dinner afterward. Dad's treating us to chez Laurent." I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. Amanda had no idea that her company's impressive new office lease was generating a significant portion of my monthly income. Sterling Marketing Group occupied the entire 38th through 40th floors of Rodriguez Tower, the 42-story building I'd purchased and renovated 2 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me that my sister worked in a building I owned while constantly expressing concern about my living situation. The disparity between my actual wealth and my chosen lifestyle had become a carefully maintained balancing act. While my real estate portfolio had grown to encompass over $85 million in commercial and residential properties throughout the Bay Area, I continued living in the same Chinatown studio I'd rented during my first year out of Stanford. The decision was partly practical. The location provided easy access to my various properties, and partly psychological. The modest apartment kept me grounded, reminded me of my goals, and frankly allowed me to avoid the complicated family dynamics that would inevitably arise if they knew the truth about my financial situation. My name is Maya Rodriguez, though most people in my family still think of me as the dreamy younger sister who chose an unconventional path after college. At 28, I'm supposedly still finding myself according to the narrative my family has constructed around my life choices. What they don't know is that I've been systematically building a real estate empire, while they worried about my apparent lack of direction. The journey to this point hadn't been straightforward. Growing up in Palo Alto as the daughter of second-generation immigrants, success had very specific definitions in the Chen household. My father, David, had built a successful accounting firm through decades of methodical work and conservative financial planning. My mother, Linda, had climbed from administrative assistant to operations director at a prestigious law firm. They valued stability, traditional career paths, and measurable achievements. Amanda had followed their blueprint perfectly. Stanford MBA, immediate placement at a top-tier marketing firm, steady promotions, luxury condo in Soma, designer clothes, and a social media presence that showcased all the markers of conventional success. She was the daughter who made sense to our parents, the one whose achievements they could easily explain to their friends and colleagues. I had been the question mark. After graduating from Stanford with a degree in economics, I'd shocked everyone by turning down offers from Goldman Sachs and McKinsey to pursue what I described vaguely as investment opportunities. The truth was more complex. During my senior year, I'd become fascinated with real estate development after taking an elective course on urban planning. While my classmates focused on traditional finance careers, I spent my free time studying property markets, attending real estate investment seminars and networking with local developers. My first real estate purchase had been a modest duplex in Oakland, financed with money I'd saved from internships and a small inheritance from my grandmother. The property needed significant renovation, but the neighborhood was showing signs of early gentrification. I spent 6 months learning construction basics, managing contractors and transforming the rundown duplex into an attractive rental property. Within a year, the property had appreciated by 30%, and the rental income was covering my living expenses. That initial success had been intoxicating, but I'd quickly learned that real estate investment required patience, strategy, and significant capital accumulation. For the next 2 years, I'd lived extremely modestly, reinvesting every dollar of profit into acquiring additional property. I'd bought distressed commercial spaces, small apartment buildings, and development opportunities that other investors overlooked. Each purchase taught me something new about market analysis, renovation management, and property optimization. The breakthrough had come when I'd identified an opportunity in San Francisco's financial district. A 42-story office building constructed in the 1980s was being sold by a struggling development company. The building had good bones and an excellent location, but years of deferred maintenance and poor management had scared away most potential buyers. I'd spent 3 months conducting due diligence, analyzing cash flows, and developing a comprehensive renovation plan. The purchase had required leveraging everything I'd built to that point, plus securing additional financing from private investors who believed in my vision. The renovation had taken 18 months and cost nearly $12 million, but the result was spectacular. Rodriguez Tower, as I'd renamed it, became one of the most sought-after commercial addresses in the financial district. Within 6 months of completion, the building was fully leased to high-end tenants, paying premium rent. Sterling Marketing Group had been one of my first major tenants, signing a 5-year lease for 3 full floors. Amanda had been thrilled about her company's move to such a prestigious address, never connecting the building's name with her sister's last name. Why would she? As far as the family knew, I was still figuring out my career path while living in a tiny apartment and pursuing vague business interests. The success of Rodriguez Tower had opened doors to larger opportunity. I'd formed strategic partnerships with other developers, created a property management subsidiary, and began acquiring buildings throughout the Bay Area. My portfolio now included office complexes in San Francisco and Oakland, residential developments in Marin County, and several retail properties in emerging neighborhoods. The monthly income from my properties exceeded what most people earned annually, yet I continued living in my modest studio and allowing my family to worry about my apparent lack of conventional success. The motivation for maintaining this facade was complicated. Initially, I'd been genuinely uncertain about my real estate ventures and hadn't wanted to endure skeptical questions or unwanted advice from family members who didn't understand the business. As my success grew, I'd found perverse satisfaction in proving that conventional definitions of achievement weren't the only path to financial security. There was also an element of protection involved. I'd seen how money changed family dynamics, how success could breed resentment or create expectations for financial support. By keeping my wealth private, I could maintain authentic relationships based on who I was, rather than what I owned. But perhaps most significantly, I'd grown tired of the constant comparisons between Amanda and me. Every family gathering included subtle references to her corner office, her designer wardrobe, her networking events, and her impressive salary. Meanwhile, my lifestyle was treated as a source of gentle concern, with regular suggestions about graduate school applications, job opportunities through family connections, or the importance of establishing a more stable foundation for my future. The irony was that Amanda and I had actually grown closer over the past year. Without the pressure of direct competition, we'd developed a genuine friendship built around shared interests in art, travel, and surprisingly similar senses of humor. She'd started visiting my apartment regularly, bringing takeout from expensive restaurants and marveling at how I'd maximized the small space. Her comments about my cozy studio and minimalist lifestyle weren't malicious, but they reflected her assumption that I was making the best of limited resources, rather than choosing simplicity from a position of abundance. During these visits, Amanda often shared details about her work including her excitement about Sterling Marketing Group's prestigious new offices. She'd described the building's modern amenities, the spectacular views from the 40th floor, and how the prestigious address had impressed their client. I'd listened with genuine interest, proud that my renovation work had created such a positive environment for her daily work life, even though she had no idea I was her landlord. As I prepared for the evening's celebration, I reflected on how long this charade could continue. My business was growing rapidly and I was considering opportunities that would require more public visibility. I'd been invited to speak at real estate investment conferences, and several business publications had expressed interest in profiling my company's unconventional approach to property development. Maintaining anonymity was becoming increasingly challenging, and part of me wondered if it was time to share the truth with my family. The celebration at Sterling Marketing Group was scheduled to begin at 6, followed by dinner at Chez Laurent. I chose my outfit carefully, selecting dark jeans, a simple sweater, and comfortable flats that would reinforce the image of someone who prioritized practicality over appearance. The contrast with Amanda's usual designer ensembles would be stark, exactly as it had been for months. As I walked through Chinatown toward the financial district, I passed several properties I owned or managed. The small apartment building where Mrs. Chan, an elderly widow, lived in subsidized housing that I provided below market rent. The commercial space where a family-owned restaurant had thrived since I'd renovated their kitchen and updated their lease terms. The corner building where 3 startups occupied affordable office space that I'd designed specifically for emerging businesses. These investments weren't just about financial returns, they represented my vision of responsible development that strengthened communities rather than displacing them. While other developers focused solely on maximizing profits, I'd built my portfolio around properties that created genuine value for tenants and neighborhoods. This approach had proven profitable in the long term, generating steady income streams while building a reputation for ethical business practices. Rodriguez Tower came into view as I approached the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun. The building's architecture was elegant but not ostentatious, with clean lines and environmentally sustainable features that had earned several green building certifications. I'd worked closely with architects and designers to create office spaces that prioritized natural light, efficient layouts, and modern amenities, while respecting the building's original character. The lobby was bustling with activity as office workers concluded their day. The marble floors gleamed under contemporary lighting fixtures, and the reception desk was staffed by professional security personnel who greeted every visitor warmly. I'd insisted on creating an environment that felt welcoming rather than intimidating, understanding that a building's atmosphere significantly impacted. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Tenant satisfaction and retention rates. As I rode the elevator to the 38th floor, I considered what the evening might bring. Amanda had mentioned that Sterling's CEO, Michael Sterling, would be making a special presentation about their new client acquisition and the company's future growth plans. She'd been working on this account for months, and landing it represented a significant career milestone for her. I was genuinely proud of her achievement, and looking forward to celebrating her success, even if she didn't know she was celebrating in a building I own. The elevator doors opened to reveal Sterling Marketing Group's reception area, a sophisticated space featuring modern artwork, comfortable seating areas, and floor-to-ceiling windows, offering spectacular views of San Francisco Bay. Amanda had mentioned during one of her apartment visits how impressed clients were with the office environment, noting that the prestigious address and beautiful spaces helped Sterling compete with larger agencies. Amanda's voice carried across the reception area as she approached, wearing a stunning navy dress and the confident smile that had served her well throughout her career. "I'm so glad you could make it. Wait until you see the presentation Michael has prepared. This client win is going to transform our entire company." I hugged her warmly, genuinely happy to see her excitement. "Congratulations on landing the account. You've been working incredibly hard on this." "Thanks," she replied, linking her arm through mine as she guided me toward the conference room. "It's been intense, but totally worth it. And having our offices in this building has been such an advantage. Clients are always impressed when they visit. Rodriguez Tower has this reputation for housing only the most successful companies." I nodded, suppressing a smile at her unwitting compliment to my property management decisions. It does seem like a beautiful building. The best part, Amanda continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, is that Michael thinks this success is going to lead to even bigger opportunities. He's been talking about expanding to additional floors, maybe even exploring international partnerships. Can you imagine my little sister's big sister working for a global marketing powerhouse? Her reference to me as her little sister was affectionate, but tinged with the protective concern that had characterized our relationship since childhood. Despite being only 3 years older, Amanda had always assumed a mentoring role, offering advice about career decisions, financial planning, and life choices. Her concern for my welfare was genuine, but it was based on the assumption that I needed guidance and support to navigate adult responsibilities successfully. As we entered the conference room, I was struck by how the space had turned out. The renovation had transformed what had once been a cramped, poorly lit area into an open, collaborative environment, with state-of-the-art technology and furniture designed to facilitate creative thinking. The wall of windows provided dramatic views of the bay, while the interior design balanced professionalism with warmth. Michael Sterling approached with the confident demeanor of a successful executive, extending his hand warmly. Amanda talks about you constantly. It's wonderful to finally meet the sister who lives in that charming Chinatown apartment. I shook his hand, noting the subtle emphasis he'd placed on charming, a polite way of acknowledging what he clearly perceived as my modest circumstances. Thank you for including me in the celebration. Amanda's told me how much she enjoys working here. She's been instrumental in landing our biggest client, Michael replied, his pride in Amanda evident. Which brings me to the presentation I want to share with everyone tonight. This partnership is going to elevate Sterling to an entirely new level. As the Sterling team gathered in the conference room, I took a seat toward the back, content to observe Amanda in her professional environment. She moved through the space with confidence, greeting colleagues, and clearly comfortable in her role as one of the company's rising stars. The respect her coworkers showed her was genuine, earned through years of excellent work and strategic thinking. Michael began his presentation with an overview of Sterling's growth trajectory over the past 5 years, highlighting key client acquisitions and revenue milestones. The company had clearly thrived since moving to Rodriguez Tower, benefiting from the prestigious address and modern facilities that attracted high-caliber clients and employees. But tonight, Michael announced, his voice rising with excitement, I want to share news that will fundamentally change our company's future. We've just signed a contract with Meridian Industries, the largest technology conglomerate on the West Coast. The room erupted in applause as Michael displayed the contract details on the large screen. The partnership was indeed impressive, representing millions of dollars in annual marketing spending, and the potential for long-term collaboration on multiple product launches. This success, Michael continued, demonstrates that Sterling Marketing Group has earned its place among the elite agencies in San Francisco. Our location in this prestigious building, our talented team, and our innovative approach have created the perfect foundation for continued growth. As he spoke, I noticed Michael opening his laptop and navigating to what appeared to be building information. In fact, he said, his tone becoming more animated, I want to show you all something that perfectly illustrates how far we've come. Let me pull up the ownership records for Rodriguez Tower, so you can see the caliber of company we're keeping. Amanda leaned forward with interest, clearly curious about who owned the building where she spent her day. The rest of the team seemed equally engaged, proud to work in such a prestigious location. Michael's fingers moved across his keyboard as he accessed the city's property database. Rodriguez Tower is owned by M. Rodriguez Holdings LLC, he announced, reading from the screen. Let me just pull up the detailed ownership information. A moment later, the screen displayed comprehensive property records, including the legal name of the building's owner, business registration details, and recent transaction history. Michael's confident expression began to shift as he processed the information appearing before him. That's interesting, he murmured, his brow furrowing as he studied the screen more carefully. The registered owner is listed as Maya Rodriguez. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. Amanda's face went through a series of expressions, from curiosity to confusion, to dawning realization. Maya Rodriguez, Michael repeated slowly, then looked up from his laptop directly at me. That's quite a coincidence. You share a name with the owner of our building. I could see the exact moment when the truth hit him. His eyes widened as he realized that the young woman Amanda had described as living in a tiny apartment and still figuring things out was sitting in his conference room. The same woman whose building ownership records were displayed on the screen behind him. You're telling me, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper, that Maya Rodriguez, the woman Amanda always talks about living in that tiny Chinatown apartment, is the actual owner of this entire building. And that's when Amanda's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor in the stunned silence that followed. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Michael Sterling stood frozen behind his laptop, his fingers still hovering over the trackpad as if he could somehow undo what he'd just discovered. The property records remained displayed on the massive screen, the name Maya Rodriguez, glowing in corporate blue letters that seemed to pulse with each beat of my racing heart. Amanda's shattered champagne glass lay scattered across the marble floor, tiny crystal fragments catching the late afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling window. Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their ergonomic chairs, clearly sensing that something significant had just occurred, but uncertain about its implication. The celebration atmosphere had evaporated entirely, replaced by a tension so thick it seemed to press against the contemporary art adorning the conference room walls. I remained seated in my simple jeans and sweater, acutely aware of how my casual attire contrasted with the polished professionals surrounding me. Everyone in this room earned six-figure salaries, wore designer clothing, and moved through San Francisco's elite business circles with practiced confidence. Yet none of them owned the building where they worked, the very foundation beneath their feet that provided the prestigious address they leveraged in their marketing material. Michael's eyes darted between me and the screen, his mind clearly racing to reconcile the woman Amanda had described with the property owner, whose building had become Sterling Marketing Group's crown jewel. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible, like watching someone try to solve a puzzle with pieces that shouldn't fit together but somehow did. "I'm sorry," Michael finally said, his voice carefully controlled but betraying underlying confusion. "I think there might be some mistake in the database. Maya, you said you live in Chinatown, correct? In a studio apartment?" I nodded calmly, my hands folded in my lap. "That's correct, 450 square feet on Grant Avenue. But the property records show that the owner of Rodriguez Tower, this 42-story building worth approximately $90 million, is also named Maya Rodriguez." His tone suggested he was working through a mathematical equation that wasn't adding up properly. Amanda stood abruptly, her chair rolling backward until it hit the glass wall behind her. Her face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, and I could see her mind working through the implications of what she was hearing. She knew me better than anyone else in this room, knew my living situation, my casual approach to fashion, my apparent lack of conventional career ambition. The possibility that I might own the building where she worked every day was so far outside her understanding of reality that she seemed physically unable to process it. "There has to be an explanation," she said, her voice tight with something between hope and desperation. "Maya, tell them there's been some kind of mix-up. Tell them you're not the building owner." The room waited for my response. 20 pairs of eyes focused on me with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and anticipation. I could have deflected, could have suggested the name's similarity was coincidental, could have maintained the comfortable fiction that had defined my family relationships for years. Instead, I met Amanda's gaze directly and spoke the truth that would change everything between us. "There's no mistake," I said quietly. "I do own this building. I purchased it 2 years ago through Emma Rodriguez Holdings, my property management company." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Tyler Brooks, one of Amanda's closest colleagues, actually dropped his coffee cup, sending lukewarm liquid cascading across his legal pad. Jessica Park gasped audibly, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Michael Sterling sank into his chair as if his legs had suddenly stopped supporting him, his confident executive demeanor crumbling in real time. But it was Amanda's reaction that affected me most deeply. She stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something that looked almost like grief. Her entire understanding of our relationship, of my place in the world, of the careful hierarchy she'd constructed around our family dynamics, was collapsing in front of her colleagues and professional community. "That's impossible," she whispered, though her voice carried clearly in the silent room. "You live in a tiny apartment, you shop at thrift stores, you take the bus everywhere, you're my little sister who's still figuring out her career path." Each statement landed like a small accusation, highlighting the assumptions she'd made about my life and choices. The protective concern that had motivated her comments about my modest lifestyle suddenly seemed patronizing in light of this new information. Every suggestion about graduate school, every offer to help with job applications, every gentle inquiry about my financial security had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of my actual circumstances. I stood slowly, my movement drawing everyone's attention. The conference room suddenly felt smaller, more intimate, as if the revelation had somehow altered the physical dimensions of the space. Through the windows I could see the sprawling city below, including several other properties I owned, scattered throughout different neighborhoods. Each building represented months of careful analysis, strategic investment, and hands-on management that had built my real estate portfolio into something substantial enough to support not just my modest lifestyle, but an entirely different way of living, if I chose it. "Amanda," I said gently, my voice carrying the weight of years of hidden truth, "I know this is difficult to understand. I've been deliberately private about my business interests, because I wanted to build something meaningful without external pressure or family involvement." Michael cleared his throat, clearly struggling to regain his professional composure. "Maya, if you truly own this building, then you're our landlord. Sterling Marketing Group has been paying rent to your company for the past 18 months. "That's correct," I confirm. "Your lease runs through 2027, with options for renewal. You've been excellent tenants, and I've been very pleased with how you've utilized the space." The casual way I discussed their lease seemed to underscore the surreal nature of the situation. Amanda's employer, the prestigious marketing agency that had given her career such meaning and status, was essentially my tenant. The impressive corner office she'd worked so hard to earn was in a building I owned, paid for with rental income I collected monthly. Tyler Brooks found his voice first, perhaps because his position in account management had taught him to navigate awkward client situations. "So when Amanda talks about her sister who lives in Chinatown and is still finding her direction," he said carefully, "she's actually talking about someone who owns one of the most valuable commercial properties in the financial district." "It appears so," I replied, glancing at Amanda, who remained frozen near the windows as if she might disappear into the cityscape beyond. Jessica Park leaned forward, her curiosity overcoming her shock. "But why would you choose to live so modestly, if you own this kind of real estate? The building alone must generate millions in annual revenue." It was a fair question, one that got to the heart of choices I'd made deliberately and defended privately for years. The decision to maintain my simple lifestyle while building substantial wealth had been partly practical and partly philosophical, but explaining it to a room full of people who measured success through external markers felt almost impossible. "I believe in living below my means," I said simply. "The apartment in Chinatown serves my needs perfectly, and the money I save by living modestly gets reinvested into acquiring and improving additional properties. My goal has always been to build something sustainable rather than to display wealth." Michael Sterling's business mind was clearly engaging with this explanation, even as he continued processing the personal implications. "That's actually brilliant strategy," he admitted, keeping overhead low while maximizing investment capital. "But the scale of what you're describing suggests a much larger operation than a single building." He was right, of course. Rodriguez Tower was just one component of a portfolio that had grown to encompass properties throughout the Bay Area. Each acquisition had been carefully researched and strategically chosen, building toward a comprehensive real estate business that generated substantial passive income while providing quality spaces for tenants across different market segments. I've been fortunate to identify undervalued properties and improve them in ways that benefit both tenants and the surrounding communities, I explained. Rodriguez Tower was actually a distressed asset when I purchased it. The renovation took 18 months and significant capital investment, but the result has been positive for everyone involved. Amanda finally moved, walking slowly back to the conference table but remaining standing, her hands gripping the back of her chair. "You're talking about this like it's a casual hobby," she said, her voice strained. "But you're describing a major real estate development business. How is that possible? How did you afford to buy a downtown office building? Where did you get that kind of capital?" The questions came rapid fire, each one revealing another layer of assumptions she'd made about my capabilities and resources. In her understanding, I was someone who needed career guidance and financial advice, not someone who had been systematically building wealth through sophisticated real estate investment. "I started with a duplex in Oakland right after college," I explained, settling back into my chair and preparing for the longer conversation this would require. "I used money I'd saved from internships, plus a small inheritance from Grandma Elena. The property needed extensive renovation, which I managed myself while learning construction basics and building relationships with reliable contractors." The mention of our grandmother's inheritance seemed to ground Amanda slightly, connecting my story to family history she remembered. Grandma Elena had been a formidable woman who'd built a successful tailoring business after immigrating from Mexico, and she'd always encouraged both Amanda and me to think entrepreneurially about our future. "That first property taught me everything I needed to know about real estate investment," I continued. "Market analysis, renovation management, tenant relations, cash flow optimization. Within a year, it had appreciated significantly and was generating enough rental income to support my living expenses while I looked for the next opportunity." Tyler Brooks was taking notes now, his marketing brain clearly fascinated by the business model I was describing. "So you've been building this portfolio since college? That's 6 years of continuous investment and growth?" "7 years, actually," I corrected. "I started researching real estate markets during my junior year at Stanford. By graduation, I had a detailed plan for acquiring my first property and a timeline for scaling the business over the following decade." This revelation seemed to hit Amanda particularly hard. While she'd been following the conventional path of MBA programs and corporate advancement, I'd been quietly executing a long-term wealth-building strategy that had outpaced her traditional measures of success. The sister she'd worried about, and occasionally pitied, had actually been pursuing a sophisticated business plan that required skills she was only beginning to appreciate. Michael Sterling's executive training was helping him process the business implications more quickly than the personal one. "Maya, what you're describing sounds like a significant commercial real estate operation. How many properties are we talking about?" "Currently, I own or have controlling interests in 47 properties throughout the Bay Area," I replied, watching his eyes widen with each word. "The portfolio includes office buildings, residential complexes, retail spaces, and several development projects in various stages of completion." The number seemed to echo in the conference room, 47 properties representing millions of dollars in real estate assets, managed by someone they'd assumed was struggling to establish herself professionally. Amanda sank into her chair, her carefully styled hair falling forward as she stared at the table surface. 47 properties, she repeated quietly. "You own 47 properties, and I've been worried about whether you're saving enough for retirement." The irony in her statement was profound and painful. For months, Amanda had been offering subtle advice about financial planning and career development, assuming I needed guidance to secure my future. She'd recommended investment advisors, suggested I consider more stable employment, and occasionally offered to help with rent if money was tight. All of this concern had been based on her observation of my modest lifestyle and her assumption that limited visible wealth meant limited actual resources. Jessica Park broke the silence that had fallen over the room. "Maya, I have to ask because this is just incredible, but what's your net worth? I mean, if you don't mind sharing. It's just that we're all sitting here trying to understand the scale of what you've built." The question was both natural and deeply personal, asking me to quantify in financial terms something I'd worked years to create. Net worth calculations for real estate portfolios could be complicated, involving property valuations, outstanding mortgages, depreciation schedules, and market fluctuations, but the basic numbers were straightforward enough. Based on current market valuations and accounting for all outstanding debt, my net worth is approximately $85 million, I said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather rather than a fortune that placed me among the wealthiest individuals in the region. The silence that followed was different from the previous pauses. This wasn't confusion or surprise, but a profound stillness as everyone in the room recalibrated their understanding of who I was and what my presence among them meant. $85 million wasn't just successful, it was transformational wealth that opened possibilities most people could only imagine. Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with something approaching panic. 85 million. You're worth $85 million approximately, I confirmed. Though it fluctuates with property values and market conditions, the important thing is that the portfolio generates sufficient passive income to support continued growth and acquisition opportunity. Michael Sterling was staring at me with the expression of someone who'd discovered they'd been unknowingly sitting next to a celebrity. Maya, forgive me for being direct, but you're describing a level of wealth that places you among the most successful real estate developers in Northern California. Yet you've been sitting here letting us celebrate our office lease as if it's the highlight of our business year. His observation highlighted the absurdity of the situation from his perspective. Sterling Marketing Group's executives had been proudly discussing their prestigious Rodriguez Tower address, while the building's owner sat quietly among them, wearing jeans and listening to them marvel at something she'd created. Your success with the Meridian Industries contract is genuinely impressive, I said sincerely. Building a business, growing a client base, developing talented teams, these are significant achievements regardless of who owns the building where you work. I didn't want to diminish your celebration by making it about me, but even as I said the words, I could see that my revelation had inevitably changed the dynamic in the room. The colleagues who'd been treating me as Amanda's younger sister, someone to be polite to but not necessarily taken seriously, were now reassessing every interaction through the lens of my actual status. The casual comments about my modest lifestyle, the gentle questions about my career plans, the assumption that I was still finding my direction, all of it had taken on a different meaning. Tyler Brooks was shaking his head slowly, a mixture of admiration and disbelief on his face. Amanda, your sister isn't just successful, she's built an empire. Do you realize what kind of business acumen it takes to acquire and manage 47 properties? The market knowledge, the financial sophistication, the operational expertise. Amanda looked at him, then back at me, her expression cycling through emotions I couldn't fully read. Pride, confusion, hurt, amazement, they all flickered across her features as she struggled to reconcile the sister she thought she knew with the woman sitting across from her. I don't understand, she said finally, her voice small and vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard since we were children. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell any of us? We've been treating you like you needed help, like you were struggling, like you hadn't figured out how to be an adult yet. The pain in her voice was real and deep, cutting through my satisfaction at finally revealing the truth. This wasn't just about correcting misconceptions or proving my competence. Amanda was realizing that our entire relationship had been built on false assumptions, that the protective big sister role she'd embraced had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of my actual circumstance. I wanted to build something entirely on my own, I said gently, trying to explain motivations that had seemed clear to me, but obviously hadn't considered the impact on our family relationships. Without advice or intervention or family money or connection, I needed to prove to myself that I could create something meaningful independently. But we're your family, Amanda replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. We could have supported you, celebrated with you, been proud of what you were building. Instead, we've been condescending and worried and completely clueless about who you actually are. Her words hit harder than I'd expected, highlighting consequences of my secrecy that I'd minimized or ignored. In my focus on independence and self-reliance, I'd denied my family the opportunity to know me authentically, to understand my ambitions and achievements, to share in the satisfaction of my success. I'd protected myself from potential interference, but at the cost of genuine connection. The revelation was spreading beyond just the immediate family implications. Michael Sterling's business mind was clearly processing the broader ramifications of having a major real estate developer sitting in his conference room. Maya, I have to ask, and please forgive me if this is inappropriate, but are you actively acquiring new properties? Because if you are, Sterling Marketing Group would love to discuss representing your business development interest. His pivot to potential business opportunities was both predictable and somewhat amusing. Within minutes of learning about my wealth, he was already considering how his company might benefit from a relationship with me. It was exactly the kind of dynamic I'd wanted to avoid by keeping my financial situation private. I appreciate the offer, I replied, diplomatically, but I handle most of my marketing and business development internally. I prefer to maintain a low profile in my real estate activity. Jessica Park leaned forward with curiosity. Why the low profile? With the kind of success you've achieved, you could be featured in business magazines, speaking at conferences, building a personal brand around your expertise. It was another fair question that touched on fundamental decisions about how I wanted to conduct my business and live my life. The real estate development world could be highly competitive and ego-driven, with many successful developers leveraging their wealth into social status and public recognition. I'd deliberately chosen a different approach, one that prioritized substance over style and results over recognition. I believe the properties should speak for themselves, I explained. Good buildings, satisfied tenants, improved neighborhoods, these create lasting value. Personal publicity feels like a distraction from the actual work of developing quality real estate. Amanda was studying me with new eyes, clearly trying to process not just my financial success, but the philosophical approach I'd taken to building it. You've been living like a monk while accumulating millions of dollars, she said slowly. That's either incredibly disciplined or slightly crazy. Maybe both, I admitted with a smile that felt more relaxed than any expression I'd worn since entering the building. But it's worked for me. The money I don't spend on luxury lifestyle gets reinvested into acquiring better properties and improving existing ones. Compound growth is more satisfying than expensive possessions. Tyler Brooks was nodding appreciatively. That's actually brilliant wealth management. Most people who achieve financial success immediately upgrade their lifestyle, which limits their ability to continue building wealth. You've done the opposite, maximizing growth potential by minimizing personal expenses. His analysis was accurate, though it reduced to business strategy, what had also been deeply personal choices about how I wanted to live and what I valued. The modest apartment in Chinatown wasn't just a financial decision, but a deliberate connection to community, authenticity, and the immigrant work ethic that had shaped both my and Amanda's upbringing. Michael Sterling cleared his throat, clearly preparing to address the elephant in the room that had been growing larger with each revelation. Maya, I need to ask about our lease arrangement. Now that we know you're the building owner, does this change anything about Sterling's tenants? Are there conflicts of interest we should be concerned about? It was a reasonable business question that highlighted how my hidden identity had created potential complications. Amanda worked for a company that was essentially my tenant, which could create awkward dynamics around lease negotiations, building policies, or business decisions that affected both our professional and personal relationships. Your lease agreement stands exactly as written, I assured him. Sterling Marketing Group has been an excellent tenant, and I have no intention of changing our business relationship. If anything, knowing that Amanda works here makes me even more committed to ensuring the building provides the best possible environment for your business. Amanda looked up at this, something shifting in her expression. You knew all along that I worked in your building. You knew when we signed the lease, when I got excited about the new offices, when I talked about how impressive the address was for our clients. I knew, I confirmed, and I was genuinely happy that you were excited about your workplace. I put a lot of thought into the renovation, trying to create spaces that would inspire creativity and collaboration. Knowing that it worked for you and your colleagues was incredibly satisfying. But you never said anything, she continued, her voice carrying a mixture of hurt and wonder. You just let me talk about how great my company's new building was, never mentioning that you were the person who made it great. The accusation stung because it was fundamentally accurate. I had enjoyed secretly knowing that my work had contributed to Amanda's professional happiness, but I'd denied her the opportunity to know that her sister had played a role in creating something she valued. My desire for independence had extended to taking credit for achievements that might have strengthened, rather than complicated our relationship. I wanted you to appreciate the building for what it was, not because of who owned it, I said weakly, recognizing how inadequate the explanation sounded even as I spoke it. Jessica Park's marketing background was clearly helping her process the implications of what she'd learned. Maya, what you've described isn't just real estate investment, it's comprehensive urban development with a focus on community impact. That's a story that could inspire other entrepreneurs and investors to consider similar approaches. She was right, of course. My approach to real estate development had been guided by principles about responsible growth, community preservation, and sustainable business practices that could serve as a model for others. But sharing that story would require accepting public visibility and industry recognition that I'd been deliberately avoiding. Perhaps, I acknowledged, though I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of public attention. Michael Sterling was still grappling with the personal dynamics of the situation. Amanda, how are you processing all of this, learning that your sister owns the building where you work, that she's been quietly building a real estate empire while you worried about her career prospects? Amanda was quiet for a long moment, staring out the windows at the city spread below us. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful rather than emotional. I'm realizing that I've been a terrible sister, she said simply. Not because I was mean or unsupportive, but because I never really saw Maya for who she actually was. I saw who I thought she should be, what I thought she needed, how I thought she should live her life. Her self-awareness was both surprising and touching, revealing a capacity for reflection that I hadn't fully appreciated. Amanda had always been confident in her judgments and comfortable offering advice, but she was now questioning assumptions that had shaped our relationship for years. You weren't terrible, I said gently. You were caring and concerned, which came from love. I just chose to build something privately rather than involve family in the process. But that's the thing, Amanda replied, turning to face me direct. You didn't trust me enough to share what you were doing. You didn't think I could understand or support your choices. You kept me on the outside of the most important work of your life. Her insight was more perceptive than I'd expected, cutting to the heart of decisions I'd made about trust, family relationships, and independence. I had indeed chosen to exclude her from my business development, partly from a desire for autonomy, but also from an assumption that she wouldn't understand or approve of my unconventional approach. You're right, I admitted. I did keep you on the outside, and that wasn't fair to either of us. I was so focused on proving I could succeed independently that I didn't consider how my secrecy might affect our relationship. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the conference room door. Michael's assistant appeared, looking apologetic for the interruption, but clearly having waited as long as possible to deliver what seemed to be an urgent message. Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Chen is here for the family dinner reservation. He says the table at Chez Laurent is confirmed for 7:30. The mention of our father's arrival added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Amanda and I exchanged glances, both realizing that the evening's revelations were far from over. Our parents were expecting a celebratory dinner focused on Amanda's professional success, with no preparation for learning that their supposedly struggling younger daughter was actually wealthier than the rest of the family combined. Should I tell him you'll be a few more minutes? The assistant asked, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Actually, Amanda said, standing and smoothing her dress, I think it's time for the next phase of this conversation. Maya, are you ready to share your news with Mom and Dad? The question hung in the air, laden with implications about family dynamics, truth-telling, and the courage required to fundamentally alter relationships that had been defined by years of careful assumption. I looked around the conference room one final time, at the space I'd created but never claimed, at the colleagues who now saw me entirely differently, at my sister who was struggling to reconcile the woman she'd known with the person I'd revealed myself to be. Yes, I said finally, gathering my simple purse and standing to join her. I think it's time they knew the truth too. As we prepared to leave Rodriguez Tower, the building that had served as the backdrop for this dramatic revelation, I realized that the evening was far from over. The most challenging conversations still lay ahead, with parents who had shaped both Amanda's and my understanding of success, achievement, and family responsibility. Whatever happened next would determine not just how my family saw me, but how we would all move forward together. The elevator descended through Rodriguez Tower in complete silence, Amanda and I standing side by side but feeling miles apart. The polished steel doors reflected our contrasting appearances, her sophisticated professional attire, next to my deliberately casual outfit, a visual representation of the assumptions that had governed our relationship for years. As we passed each floor, I couldn't help but think about the tenants behind those elevator doors, the businesses and organizations that trusted me to provide them with quality workspace, while having no idea their landlord was a 28-year-old woman in jeans and sneakers. 22nd floor housed Meridian Financial, a boutique investment firm that specialized in sustainable technology startup. I'd personally worked with their partners to customize their office layout, incorporating soundproof conference rooms and high-speed internet infrastructure that supported their complex financial modeling requirements. The partners had been thrilled with the results, often mentioning to other prospective tenants how responsive and professional their building management was. 18th floor was home to Chen & Associates Architecture, no relation to our family despite the shared surname. The firm focused on residential design for emerging neighborhoods, and I'd given them favorable lease terms because their work aligned with my own philosophy about responsible development. Their projects consistently enhanced communities rather than displacing them, creating housing that was both beautiful and accessible to diverse income levels. 15th floor contained the offices of Pacific Legal Aid, a nonprofit organization providing immigration services to underserved communities. I'd offered them well below market rent and included utilities in their lease, recognizing the vital role they played in supporting families like our grandparents had been decades earlier. Their attorneys worked tirelessly to help people navigate complex legal systems, and I was proud that my building could serve as a foundation for such important work. Each floor represented careful tenant selection and relationship building that had taken months of evaluation and negotiation. I didn't simply rent space to the highest bidder, but sought organizations and businesses that would create positive synergy within the building while contributing meaningfully to the broader community. This approach had resulted in longer tenant retention, stronger referral networks, and a reputation that attracted quality businesses willing to pay premium rents for the privilege of being part of something special. Amanda remained silent during our descent, presumably processing the enormity of what she'd learned about my actual circumstance. The sister she'd worried about, offered career advice to, and occasionally pitied for her apparent lack of conventional success, owned the very building where she experienced her greatest professional achievement. Every meeting with important clients, every celebration of company milestones, every moment of pride in Sterling Marketing Group's prestigious address had taken place in a space I'd created and maintained. As we reached the lobby, I noticed the evening security guard, Carlos, preparing for the shift change. Carlos had been with the building since before my renovation began, and I'd made sure to retain him and the rest of the existing staff when I took ownership. He knew me by sight from my regular visits to check on maintenance issues and tenant concerns, though he had no idea I was anything more than a property management representative. "Good evening, Miss Rodriguez," he said warmly as we passed his desk. "Working late again tonight?" "Just wrapping up a meeting," I replied with a smile. "Have a good evening, Carlos." Amanda glanced at me as we exited through the revolving doors onto the busy financial district sidewalk. "He knows you," she observed, her tone carrying new undertones of curiosity and evaluation. "I visit the building regularly to check on operations and address any tenant concerns," I explained. "Good property management requires hands-on attention to detail." The truth was more complex than that simple explanation suggested. I genuinely enjoyed the operational aspects of real estate ownership, from reviewing maintenance requests to planning capital improvements to ensuring tenant satisfaction. Unlike many property owners who delegated everything to management companies, I maintained direct involvement in the day-to-day functioning of my building. This approach occasionally meant taking phone calls about broken elevator systems or coordinating emergency repairs, but it also meant building relationships with tenants and staff that resulted in better outcomes for everyone involved. We walked through the early evening crowds toward the restaurant where our parents waited, office workers heading home from their daily routines, while tourists consulted maps and locals navigated familiar paths with practiced efficiency. The energy of the city at this hour was one of transition, the business day concluding while evening entertainment began, different populations sharing the same sidewalks, but moving toward entirely different destinations. "Maya," Amanda said suddenly, stopping abruptly near the intersection of Market and Montgomery. "I need to understand something before we see Mom and Dad. Why real estate? Of all the possible businesses you could have started, why did you choose property development?" The question was more thoughtful than I'd expected, suggesting she was moving beyond the shock of learning about my wealth toward genuine curiosity about my motivations and decision-making process. Real estate hadn't been an obvious choice for someone with my educational background and family expectations, and explaining my attraction to the industry required discussing values and perspectives that had been developing long before I purchased my first property. "Do you remember Grandma Elena's stories about finding affordable housing when she first immigrated?" I asked, leaning against the brick wall of a century-old building that had somehow survived San Francisco's constant development pressure. Amanda nodded, her expression softening at the mention of our grandmother. Elena Rodriguez had been a formidable woman who'd arrived in California with limited English, but unlimited determination, eventually building a successful alteration business that supported 3 generations of family members. Her stories about struggling to find landlords willing to rent to Mexican immigrants had been both heartbreaking and inspiring, illustrating how housing access could determine someone's entire life trajectory. She always said that having a safe, affordable place to live was the foundation for everything else. I continued. Education, employment, community connections, family stability, none of it was possible without housing security. Her stories made me realize that property ownership isn't just about accumulating wealth, it's about creating the physical infrastructure that allows communities to thrive. Amanda was listening intently, her business-trained mind clearly processing the connection between personal values and investment strategy. "So you saw real estate as a way to honor her legacy while building financial security?" "Partly," I acknowledged, "but also because I recognized that responsible property development could address multiple priorities simultaneously. Well-designed buildings enhance neighborhoods, create employment opportunities, generate tax revenue for local services, and provide essential space for businesses and residents. Done thoughtfully, real estate investment becomes community investment." This philosophy had guided every property acquisition and renovation project I'd undertaken. Rather than simply maximizing rental income, I'd consistently chosen strategies that balanced profitability with positive community impact. Sometimes this meant accepting lower returns in exchange for supporting local businesses, or maintaining affordable housing options, but the long-term results had validated this approach both financially and personally. We resumed walking toward the restaurant, but Amanda's questions continued. "How did you learn the technical aspects of real estate development, market analysis, construction management, financing structures? These aren't topics covered in undergraduate economics courses." She was right that my Stanford education had provided theoretical foundation, but little practical knowledge about real estate investment. The skills required for successful property development had been acquired through intensive self-education, mentorship relationships, and hands-on experience that had sometimes been expensive and painful. I spent my senior year auditing graduate courses in urban planning and attending every real estate investment seminar I could find. I explained. Nights and weekends I was reading industry publications, studying market reports, and networking with local developers who were willing to share their expertise with an enthusiastic student. The learning process had been overwhelming at times, requiring me to master everything from construction cost estimation, to zoning regulations, to commercial lending requirements. Each area of knowledge demanded sustained study and practical application, but the complexity had been part of the appeal. Real estate development was intellectually challenging in ways that traditional corporate careers might not have provided. I also found mentors. I continued. Patricia Williams, who developed affordable housing in Oakland, taught me about community engagement and sustainable financing. Robert Chen, no relation to our family, showed me how to evaluate distressed properties and manage large-scale renovation. David Kim helped me understand commercial leasing and tenant relationship management. These relationships had been crucial to my early success, providing guidance that prevented costly mistakes while accelerating my learning curve. Each mentor had emphasized different aspects of the business, from financial analysis to construction supervision to regulatory compliance, gradually building my expertise across all areas required for independent property development. Amanda was processing this information with the analytical skills that had made her successful in marketing strategy. You essentially completed an informal graduate education in real estate development while working full-time on your first property investment. That's an incredible amount of self-directed learning. It was necessary, I replied simply. The stakes were high enough that I couldn't afford to make uninformed decisions. Every property purchase represented years of potential income, and mistakes in due diligence or renovation planning could have bankrupted the entire operation. The pressure had been intense during those early years, when my entire net worth was tied up in properties that needed substantial work before they could generate positive cash flow. Sleepless nights had been common as I worried about construction delays, cost overruns, or market fluctuations that could undermine carefully calculated investment projections. But the stress had been balanced by the satisfaction of seeing neglected buildings transformed into thriving community assets. What about financing? Amanda asked, as we approached Chez Laurent's elegant storefront. Real estate development requires substantial capital, and you were essentially starting from nothing after college. The financing question went to the heart of how I'd been able to scale from a single duplex to a multi-million-dollar portfolio in less than 7 years. Traditional bank lending had been part of the equation, but creative financing strategies had been essential for acquiring properties that required significant renovation before they could qualify for conventional mortgages. The first few properties were financed through a combination of personal savings, traditional mortgages, and private investors who believed in specific projects. I explained. But as I established a track record of successful renovations and stable rental income, financing became easier to obtain on more favorable terms. What I didn't mention was the months I'd spent learning about alternative financing structures, from seller financing to hard money loans, to partnership agreements that allowed me to acquire properties with limited capital while sharing profits with investors who provided funding. Each deal had required creative problem-solving and relationship building that expanded my network of potential partners and funding sources. Maya, Amanda said quietly as we paused outside the restaurant, I'm beginning to understand that what you've built isn't just financially impressive, it's intellectually sophisticated in ways I never appreciated. You've essentially created a comprehensive business that requires expertise in construction, finance, law, marketing, and community development. Her recognition of the complexity involved in my work was gratifying in ways I hadn't expected. For years, family conversations had focused on my apparently simple lifestyle and unclear career direction, never acknowledging the depth of knowledge and skill required for successful real estate development. Amanda's growing appreciation for what I'd accomplished felt like validation from someone whose business judgment I'd always respected. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot coming from you. We stood together outside Chez Laurent, both of us aware that the next phase of the evening would bring new challenges as we shared this information with our parents. David and Linda Chen had spent decades building their own version of success through traditional careers and conservative financial planning. Learning that their supposedly directionless younger daughter had accumulated more wealth than they'd achieved through their entire working lives would require significant adjustment on their part. Are you ready for this? Amanda asked, her hand on the restaurant's brass door handle. I think so, I replied, though the truth was more complicated. Revealing my financial success to Michael Sterling and Amanda's colleagues had been challenging but relatively contained. Sharing the same information with our parents would inevitably reshape family dynamics in ways I couldn't predict or control. The maitre d' greeted us warmly and guided us toward the table where our parents waited. David Chen sat reviewing what appeared to be business documents, his reading glasses perched on his nose and his expression focused in the way that had characterized his approach to work throughout my childhood. Linda Chen was studying the wine menu with the careful attention she brought to all decisions, from major life choices to restaurant selections. They looked up as we approached, their faces brightening with genuine pleasure at seeing both their daughters together. The warmth of their greeting reminded me of how much I loved them despite the complications that had developed around their expectations and my unconventional choices. There are my successful daughters, David said, standing to embrace us both. Amanda, congratulations again on landing that major client. Linda and I are so proud of what you've accomplished, Linda nodded enthusiastically, her smile encompassing both of us. And Maya, it's wonderful to see you taking time away from your projects to join us for a proper celebration. Their comments reflected the careful way they'd learned to discuss my work, acknowledging that I was busy with something without necessarily understanding or approving of what that something involved. For years, they'd navigated conversations about my career by remaining supportive but vague, expressing confidence in my eventual success without prying too deeply into activities they might find concerning. As we settled into our seats at the elegant table, I was struck by the irony of our location. Shattering was one of San Francisco's most expensive restaurants, the kind of establishment that symbolized the success my parents had worked decades to achieve. Yet the cost of our dinner represented a tiny fraction of the daily rental income generated by my property portfolio, a financial reality that would fundamentally alter how they understood our family's economic position. "Before we order," Amanda said, her voice carrying subtle tension that our parents hadn't yet noticed, "Maya has some news to share about her work." David and Linda turned toward me with expressions of polite interest mixed with parental concern. They'd received updates about my mysterious business activities for years, never quite sure whether to worry about my financial security or trust that I knew what I was doing. Tonight would finally provide the clarity they'd been seeking, though not in the way any of us had anticipated. "Actually," I said, glancing around the restaurant's elegant dining room, "perhaps we should order first and then talk. It's going to be a longer conversation than you might expect." The catalyst moment. The sommelier appeared at our table with practiced precision, his knowledge of wine pairings and vintage selections, reflecting the level of service that made Shattering a destination for San Francisco's business elite. As he described the evening's recommended wines, I found myself calculating that his annual salary was probably less than what I earned from Rodriguez Tower in a typical week. The thought wasn't meant to be dismissive, but rather highlighted how dramatically my financial perspective had shifted over the past few years. Our parents ordered with the careful consideration they'd always applied to expensive dining, treating this dinner as a special occasion worthy of celebration. David selected a bottle of Bordeaux that cost more than many families spent on groceries in a month, while Linda chose an appetizer she'd been wanting to try since reading about it in a food magazine. Their approach to luxury was measured and appreciative, reflecting values shaped by years of working toward financial security rather than taking it for granted. "So Maya," Linda said once the sommelier had departed, "Amanda mentioned you have news about your business. Are you finally ready to tell us what exactly you've been working on all these years?" The question was asked with maternal warmth, but underlying curiosity that had been building for years. Both parents had respected my privacy about my professional activities while clearly wondering whether their concerns about my unconventional path were justified. They'd watched me live modestly while claiming to be busy with investment projects, never quite sure whether to trust my assurances that everything was proceeding well. "I suppose it's time for complete honesty," I said, setting down my water glass and meeting both their gazes direct. "I've been deliberately private about my work because I wanted to build something substantial before involving family in discussions about it." David's expression shifted slightly, his accountant's instincts recognizing the preamble to significant financial disclosure. "What kind of business have you been building exactly?" "Real estate development," I replied simply. "I've been acquiring and renovating properties throughout the Bay Area for the past 7 years. The revelation itself seemed almost anticlimactic after the dramatic scene in Sterling Marketing Group's conference room. Our parents absorbed the information with thoughtful nods, clearly processing what real estate development might mean in terms of financial commitment and potential return. "Real estate can be very lucrative," Linda acknowledged diplomatically. "How many properties are you working with?" "Currently, I own 47 properties," I said, watching their expressions change as they processed the scale of what I was describing. "The portfolio includes office buildings, residential complexes, retail spaces, and several development projects." The number seemed to hang in the air between us, 47 properties representing a level of business activity far beyond what they'd imagined when I mentioned investment projects. David's eyes widened behind his reading glasses as his financial training kicked in, calculating the potential value and complexity of managing such an extensive portfolio. 47 properties, he repeated slowly. "Maya, that's not a small business," That's a major real estate operation. How did you finance that kind of expansion? The question went to the heart of their concerns about my financial choices over the past several years. They'd worried about my modest lifestyle and apparent lack of steady income, never realizing that I was systematically reinvesting every dollar of profit into acquiring additional properties rather than upgrading my personal circumstance. I started with the duplex in Oakland, using savings and Grandma Elena's inheritance, I explained. Each successful renovation and rental generated capital for the next acquisition. The business has been entirely self-funded through reinvestment of profit. Amanda had been quietly observing our parents' reactions, clearly remembering her own shock at learning the true scope of my business operations. Mom, Dad, she interjected gently, you should know that one of Maya's properties is the building where I work, Rodriguez Tower in the financial district. This additional information seemed to overwhelm our parents' ability to process what they were hearing. Linda's fork paused halfway to her mouth, while David set down his wine glass with enough force to create a small splash on the white tablecloth. You own Rodriguez Tower? Linda asked, her voice rising slightly before she caught herself and glanced around the restaurant. The 42-story building where Sterling Marketing Group has their offices. I purchased it 2 years ago and completed an 18-month renovation. Amanda's company has been an excellent tenant. David was staring at me with the expression of someone trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. Maya, Rodriguez Tower is worth tens of millions of dollars. How is it possible that you own a downtown office building while living in a studio apartment in Chinatown? The question captured the fundamental disconnect between my lifestyle choices and my actual financial capacity. For years, they'd assumed that modest living meant modest means, never considering that someone might choose simplicity despite having access to luxury. I prefer to live below my means and reinvest profits into growing the business, I explained. The apartment in Chinatown meets my needs perfectly, and the money I save gets directed toward acquiring and improving additional property. Linda was shaking her head slowly, her motherly instincts struggling to reconcile the daughter she thought she knew with the person I was revealing myself to be. You've been letting us worry about your financial security while secretly building a real estate empire. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable, echoing Amanda's earlier reaction about being excluded from my actual life and achievement. My desire for independence had protected me from unwanted advice and interference, but it had also denied my family the opportunity to know who I really was and what I was accomplishing. I wasn't trying to deceive anyone, I said carefully. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could build something meaningful without family involvement or support. But we're your family, David replied, his tone carrying both pride and frustration. We could have offered advice, connections, financial backing if needed. Instead, you've been struggling alone while we wondered whether you needed help with basic living expenses. His comment highlighted another layer of misunderstanding that had shaped our family dynamic. While I'd been focused on independence and self-reliance, they'd been concerned about my welfare and wondering whether their parenting had somehow failed to prepare me for adult financial responsibility. The sommelier returned to refill our wine glasses, providing a brief interruption that allowed everyone to process what had been shared so far. The elegant restaurant continued its evening rhythm around us, other families and business associates enjoying their meals while remaining oblivious to the dramatic conversation unfolding at our table. Maya, Linda said once we were alone again, I need to understand the scope of what you've built. What's the total value of your property portfolio? The question I'd been dreading finally arrived, requiring me to quantify my success in terms that would fundamentally alter how my family understood our relative financial position. Net worth calculations for real estate portfolios involved numerous variables, but the basic numbers were straightforward enough. Based on current market valuations and accounting for outstanding debt, I said quietly, my net worth is approximately $85 million. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable, stretching long enough that I began to worry about our parents' ability to process such an enormous figure. $85 million wasn't just successful, it was generational wealth that opened possibilities most families could only imagine. David's accounting background helped him recover first, though his voice remained strained. 85 million. Maya, That's more money than most people earn in several lifetimes. You're describing wealth that places you among the most successful entrepreneurs in Northern California. I've been fortunate to identify good opportunities and execute them effectively, I replied, trying to downplay achievements that suddenly seemed overwhelming when stated so direct. Linda was staring at me with an expression I couldn't fully interpret, mixing maternal pride with something approaching disbelief. Our daughter, who we've been worrying about, is actually wealthier than everyone else we know combined. Amanda leaned forward across the table, her own processing of this information clearly ongoing. Mom, Dad, I think what's most remarkable isn't just the financial success but how Maya achieved. She's built this entire business through her own research, relationship building, and strategic decision making. No family money, no business school connections, no corporate backing. Her support was unexpected and deeply meaningful, representing a shift from the competitive dynamic that had sometimes characterized our relationship toward genuine sisterly pride. Amanda's marketing expertise allowed her to appreciate the business sophistication required for what I'd accomplished, even as she continued processing the personal implications. How did you acquire the knowledge needed for real estate development? David asked, his accountant's mind clearly fascinated by the educational and professional development aspects of my journey. Property acquisition, construction management, financing structures, these require specialized expertise, intensive self-education, I replied. Graduate courses, industry seminars, mentorship, relationships with experienced developers, and learning from mistakes on early projects. It's been 7 years of continuous study and practical application. The conversation was interrupted by our server arriving to take dinner orders, providing another brief respite that allowed everyone to collect their thoughts. I ordered the salmon while continuing to marvel at how surreal it felt to discuss my hidden wealth in such an elegant setting with family members who were still processing the enormity of what they'd learned. Maya, Linda said once our server departed, I have to ask a difficult question. Why didn't you trust us enough to share what you were building? Did you think we wouldn't understand or support your choices? The question cut to the heart of my motivations for maintaining secrecy about my business activity. The answer involved complex feelings about family expectations, independence, and my own insecurities about whether my unconventional path would ultimately prove successful. It wasn't about trust, I said slowly, trying to articulate feelings I'd never examined close. I needed to prove to myself that I could create something meaningful, entirely through my own efforts. If I'd involved family from the beginning, I would never have known whether my success was due to my own capabilities or external support. David nodded thoughtfully, his expression suggesting understanding even if disagreement. I can appreciate the desire for independence, but excluding family also meant excluding people who care about you and want to celebrate your achievements. I realize that now. Admit my focus on self-reliance prevented me from sharing the satisfaction of building something successful. You've missed years of being proud of what I was accomplishing because I kept it private. Amanda was studying me with new appreciation for the complexity of my motivation. You've been carrying the entire burden of this business alone. No family emotional support, no one to celebrate milestones with, no one to provide perspective during difficult decisions. She was right that my insistence on independence had created isolation I hadn't fully acknowledged. While I'd been proud of building my real estate portfolio without external help, I'd also denied myself the encouragement and celebration that could have made the journey more enjoyable and meaningful. There were definitely lonely moments, I acknowledge, particularly during the early years when I wasn't sure whether my investments would succeed. Having family support would have made those periods less stressful. Linda reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her motherly instincts overriding any frustration about being excluded from my business development. We're proud of what you've accomplished, my amazed, confused, a little hurt that you didn't trust us with the truth, but ultimately proud of your success and your determination. Her words provided emotional validation I hadn't realized I needed, confirming that family support could coexist with recognition of my independent achievement. The fear that involving family might diminish my sense of personal accomplishment seemed less important now than the missed opportunities for connection and shared celebration. Thank you, I said simply, feeling some of the tension I'd carried for years beginning to dissolve. That means everything to me, David was processing the business implications with the analytical approach that had characterized his entire career. Maya, what you've described represents a major enterprise that probably requires substantial ongoing management. How do you handle the operational aspects of 47 properties? The question touched on daily realities of real estate ownership that most people never consider. Property management involved everything from maintenance coordination to tenant relations, to financial oversight, requiring systems and staff that could handle complex operations across multiple locations. I have a property management company that handles day-to-day operations, I explained, but I maintain direct involvement in major decisions, tenant relationships, and strategic planning. Good real estate ownership requires hands-on attention to detail. And you're doing all of this while living in a 400-square-foot apartment, Amanda observed with something approaching admiration. Maya, you've created a lifestyle that's completely disconnected from your actual financial capacity. Her observation was accurate, highlighting choices I'd made deliberately, but never fully examined from an outside perspective. My modest living situation wasn't just about financial efficiency, but reflected values about simplicity, community connection, and avoiding the lifestyle inflation that often accompanied wealth accumulation. The apartment serves my needs perfectly. I'd rather invest in properties that benefit communities than spend money on luxury possessions I don't actually want. Linda was studying me with the expression she'd worn throughout my childhood when trying to understand my unconventional thinking. But Maya, you could afford to live anywhere, buy anything, travel extensively. Don't you want to enjoy the fruits of your success? It was a fair question that highlighted different approaches to wealth and happiness. Many people work toward financial success specifically to access luxury experiences and possessions, while I'd found satisfaction in the building process itself rather than the lifestyle it could support. I do enjoy what I've built, I replied. The satisfaction comes from creating quality spaces that enhance communities and provide good experiences for tenants. The money is important, because it allows me to continue doing that work, but it's not the primary motivation. Our appetizers arrived as I was speaking, providing another natural pause in what had become the most honest conversation our family had shared in years. The revelation about my financial success was obviously significant, but the deeper value lay in finally discussing my actual priorities, motivations, and perspectives without the defensive barriers I'd maintained for so long. Maya, David said as he sampled his appetizer, I need to ask about your long-term plans. What you've built is substantial enough to last several lifetimes, but real estate development typically requires continued growth and investment. What are your goals for the next phase? The question was both practical and personal, asking me to articulate ambitions that had been evolving as my business matured. Early goals had focused on proving my competence and building financial security, but success had opened possibilities I was still learning to consider. I'm exploring opportunities to expand into sustainable development projects that address housing affordability and environmental concerns, I said thoughtfully. There's growing demand for residential and commercial spaces that balance quality design with responsible resource use. Amanda's marketing background helped her recognize the strategic potential of this direction. That's actually brilliant positioning. Sustainable development is becoming increasingly important to both tenants and investors, and you could become a recognized leader in that space. Her insight suggested possibilities I hadn't fully considered about building a public profile around my development philosophy. For years I'd avoided recognition or publicity, but there might be value in sharing my approach with other developers and investors who were interested in similar principles. I've also been considering philanthropic applications of real estate development. I continue using some properties to provide affordable housing or nonprofit space at below market rates, creating community resources rather than just investment return. Linda's expression brightened at this mention of community service, reflecting values she'd instilled throughout my childhood about using success to benefit others. That sounds like a wonderful way to honor Grandma Lena's legacy while helping families who face the same challenges she experienced. The connection to our grandmother's immigration experience felt meaningful and appropriate,
linking my business success to family history and values that had shaped both Amanda's and my perspectives about work, community, and responsibility. As our main courses arrived, I realized that the evening had evolved beyond simple revelation into genuine family conversation about goals, values, and possibility. The shock of learning about my financial success was giving way to deeper discussions about what that success meant and how it might be used constructively. "I have one more question," Amanda said as she cut into her entree. "Maya, you've been incredibly disciplined about living modestly while building substantial wealth, but don't you ever want to experience some of the things your success could provide? Travel, luxury experiences, beautiful possessions." The question touched on assumptions about what wealth should mean in terms of lifestyle and personal satisfaction. Amanda's own career success had been motivated partly by access to quality experiences and possessions, making my different approach both puzzling and admirable from her perspective. "I do travel," I said with a smile, "though usually to research potential property acquisitions or study development projects in other cities. Last month I spent 2 weeks in Portland and Seattle analyzing sustainable housing initiatives that I might adapt for Bay Area projects." "That's work travel," Amanda protested with exasperation. "I'm talking about vacation travel, experiencing different cultures, staying in beautiful hotels, exploring places purely for pleasure." Her point was valid, highlighting how my focus on business development had limited my personal experiences in ways that might be unnecessarily restrictive. The wealth I'd accumulated could certainly support extensive travel and luxury experiences if I chose to pursue them. "Perhaps it's time to consider that," I acknowledged. "Success shouldn't require completely sacrificing personal enjoyment or new experiences." David raised his wine glass in what appeared to be a toast.
"To Maya," he said warmly, "for achieving something remarkable through her own vision and determination, and for finally trusting us enough to share her success." Linda and Amanda joined the toast, their faces reflecting pride, love, and continuing amazement at how thoroughly they'd misunderstood my circumstances for so many years. As we touched glasses across the elegant table, I felt a profound sense of relief and connection that had been missing from our family relationships. The evening was far from over, and there would undoubtedly be more questions, discussions, and adjustments as everyone processed the implications of what they'd learned. But for the first time in years, I felt genuinely known and appreciated by my family, not for who they thought I should be, but for who I actually was and what I'd managed to accomplish. The weeks following our family dinner at Chez Laurent brought a complete transformation in how my relationships operated. Where once there had been careful distance and unspoken concerns about my direction, now there was genuine curiosity and respect for what I'd built. My parents called regularly with questions about real estate markets and investment strategies, while Amanda began including me in professional conversations that acknowledged my business expertise, rather than treating me as someone who needed career guidance. The validation I'd been seeking for years arrived in unexpected ways. David started forwarding articles about sustainable development and affordable housing initiatives, adding notes about how my approach might benefit from similar strategies. Linda began introducing me to her friends as my daughter who owns that beautiful building in the financial district, her pride evident in every conversation. Most surprisingly, Amanda invited me to lunch with several of her Sterling Marketing Group colleagues, who were interested in real estate investment opportunities. "Maya," she said over coffee at a cafe near Rodriguez Tower, "Tyler and Jessica have been asking if you'd be willing to share some insights about real estate investment. They're fascinated by your approach and wondering if there might be opportunities for smaller-scale participation in your projects." The request represented a complete reversal of our typical dynamic, with Amanda now positioning me as the expert whose knowledge could benefit others. Her colleague's interest was flattering but also complicated, given that I'd spent years avoiding exactly this kind of attention to my business activity. "I'm happy to share general insights about real estate markets," I replied carefully, "but I typically don't involve friends or family in my investment projects. It can complicate relationships when business and personal connections overlap." Amanda nodded understandingly, though I could see disappointment in her expression. "I understand the concern about mixing business with personal relationships, but Tyler mentioned that he has significant savings that aren't generating good returns, and Jessica inherited money from her grandmother that she's not sure how to invest productively." Her explanation highlighted a common challenge many people faced in trying to grow wealth through real estate investment without the specialized knowledge required for successful property development. Traditional investment options like stocks and bonds offered limited returns, while real estate required expertise that took years to develop. There might be educational opportunities that could help them, I suggest. Real estate investment clubs, seminars by experienced developers, maybe some book recommendations for understanding market analysis and property evaluation. That would be incredibly helpful, Amanda replied eagerly. They're both smart people who just lack the specialized knowledge you've spent years acquiring. The conversation continued as we walked through the financial district, passing several buildings I owned or managed. The irony wasn't lost on me that Amanda was now seeking my advice about investment strategies while we moved through a neighborhood where I controlled millions of dollars in commercial real estate. As we approached Rodriguez Tower, Amanda paused at the entrance, looking up at the building's impressive facade. Maya, I still can't quite believe that you own this place. Every day when I come to work, I remember that my little sister created the environment where I have my most important professional experiences. Her comment reflected a shift in perspective that had been occurring gradually since the revelation dinner. Rather than feeling threatened or diminished by my success, Amanda seemed to be finding ways to appreciate how our different paths had led to mutually beneficial outcomes. I'm glad Sterling Marketing Group has been happy with the space, I replied. Knowing that you work here has made the building even more meaningful to me. We entered the lobby together, Amanda greeting the security staff with familiarity while I noted several maintenance items that needed attention. Carlos nodded respectfully as we passed, clearly recognizing me as someone important to the building's operations without understanding my actual role as owner. Miss Rodriguez, he said warmly, I wanted to thank you for arranging that repair to the heating system on the 15th floor. Pacific Legal Aid was very appreciative of how quickly the issue was resolved. Of course, I replied, making a mental note to follow up with the HVAC contractor about preventive maintenance scheduling. Please let me know if any other tenants have concerns. Amanda observed this interaction with new understanding of my hands-on approach to property management. You really do maintain direct involvement in building operations, she said as we waited for the elevator. Most property owners I know delegate everything to management company. Good tenant relationships require personal attention, I explained. When tenants feel heard and valued, they stay longer, take better care of their spaces and refer other quality businesses. It's more work than delegating everything, but the results justify the effort. The elevator arrived and Amanda pressed the button for Sterling's floors while I selected the building's top level, where I maintained a small office for meeting with tenants and managing property operations. Few people knew about this space, which I used for confidential business activities that required privacy from my Chinatown apartment. Maya, Amanda said as we rose through the building, can I ask you something personal? Now that our family knows about your success, are you planning to change how you live? Maybe find a larger apartment or upgrade your lifestyle in other ways? The question touched on decisions I'd been considering since revealing my financial situation. The modest lifestyle I'd maintained while building wealth had been partly strategic and partly philosophical, but there were aspects of my living situation that might benefit from some adjustments. I'm thinking about it, I admit. The apartment in Chinatown will always be special to me, but there might be benefits to having a larger space for hosting business meetings or accommodating guests when family visits. You could afford an incredible place anywhere in the city, Amanda observed. Pacific Heights, Nob Hill, Presidio Heights, anywhere you wanted. She was right that my financial resources could support virtually any residential choice in San Francisco, from historic mansions to modern penthouses with spectacular views. But the decision involved more than affordability, requiring me to consider how lifestyle changes might affect my values and daily routines. Location would be important, I said thoughtfully. I'd want something that maintains connection to the communities where I work while providing space for business activities. The elevator opened at Sterling Marketing Group's floor, and Amanda stepped out while holding the door. Whatever you decide, I hope you'll let us be part of the process. Mom would love to help with decorating, and Dad has opinions about every real estate decision ever made. Her invitation to include family in future decisions represented a significant shift from the independence I'd insisted upon while building my business. The prospect of sharing major life choices with people who understood and supported my goals was appealing in ways I hadn't expected. I'd like that, I replied sincerely, It would be good to have family input on important decisions. As the elevator continued to the top floor, I reflected on how dramatically my relationships had evolved since the revelation dinner. The defensive isolation I'd maintained while proving my competence had given way to genuine connection and mutual respect that felt more satisfying than the solitary achievement I'd originally sought. My private office occupied a corner of Rodriguez Tower's top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows providing panoramic views of San Francisco Bay and the East Bay Hills beyond. The space was simply furnished but elegantly appointed, reflecting the same aesthetic philosophy I applied to tenant improvements throughout the building. I settled at my desk and opened my laptop to review the morning's property management report. 3 buildings required attention for various maintenance issues, 2 prospective tenants needed lease proposals, and my attorney had sent documents for a potential acquisition in Oakland that could add affordable housing units to my portfolio. The Oakland opportunity was particularly interesting because it involved a historic building that had been vacant for several years due to previous owners' inability to navigate complex renovation requirements. The property was located in a neighborhood undergoing gradual improvement, and my analysis suggested it could be transformed into quality affordable housing while preserving its architectural character. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Williams, the affordable housing developer who had served as one of my early mentors. "Maya, I have a proposal that might interest you. Can you meet for coffee this afternoon?" Patricia's message intrigued me because she rarely made vague requests for meetings. Her expertise in affordable housing development had been invaluable during my early years, and she typically contacted me with specific opportunities or challenges that required collaboration. I replied confirming availability and suggesting a cafe near her Oakland office. The drive across the Bay Bridge would give me an opportunity to examine the historic building I was considering while meeting with someone whose judgment I trusted completely. 2 hours later, I sat across from Patricia in a comfortable cafe that served the kind of excellent coffee that fueled Oakland's creative community. Patricia looked energetic despite her 72 years, her silver hair pulled back in a practical style, and her eyes bright with the enthusiasm that had driven decades of community development work. "Maya," she began without preamble, "I'm considering a major expansion of my affordable housing initiatives, and I'd like to discuss the possibility of a formal partnership." Her proposal caught me by surprise, though I'd always admired her work and occasionally collaborated on projects that aligned with both our goals. Patricia's developments consistently achieved the difficult balance between affordability and quality, creating housing that served low-income families without feeling institutional or temporary. "What kind of partnership are you envisioning?" I asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. "A joint venture that would allow us to tackle larger projects than either of us could handle independently," she explained, pulling out a folder of documents. "You have capital and development expertise. I have experience with affordable housing financing and community engagement. Together, we could address housing challenges at a scale that would make a real difference." The documents she shared outlined ambitious plans for developing affordable housing complexes throughout the East Bay, each project designed to provide quality homes for families while strengthening neighborhoods through thoughtful design and community amenities. "This is impressive work," I said, studying the architectural plans and financial projections. "But affordable housing development requires navigating complex regulatory requirements and financing structures that I haven't worked with extensively." Patricia smiled, knowing, "That's exactly why partnership makes sense. You'd handle the acquisition and renovation aspects, while I'd manage regulatory compliance and community relations. Neither of us would have to become expert in areas outside our core competence." Her logic was compelling, offering a way to expand my impact on housing affordability while working with someone whose values and expertise complemented my own. The financial returns would be lower than my typical commercial projects, but the community benefits could be substantial. "How many units are we discussing?" I asked, beginning to calculate the capital requirements and timeline for such an undertaking. "Phase 1 would be 300 units across 5 properties," Patricia replied. "If successful, we could scale to over 1,000 units within 5 years. The need is certainly there, and the political support for affordable housing has never been stronger." The scope she described represented a significant commitment that would require substantial capital and several years of focused effort. but it also offered an opportunity to use my real estate success for purposes that honored my grandmother's legacy while addressing current community needs. I'm very interested, I said carefully, but I'd need to review the financial structures and regulatory requirements before making any commitments. Of course, Patricia replied, her expression suggesting she'd expected this response. Take whatever time you need. But Maya, this could be your opportunity to transform real estate success into lasting community impact. Her words resonated deeply, connecting my business achievements to possibilities for broader social contribution. The wealth I'd accumulated through market-rate property development could support affordable housing initiatives that addressed fundamental challenges facing Bay Area communities. As we parted ways, I drove toward the historic Oakland building I'd been considering for acquisition. The neighborhood showed clear signs of improvement, with new businesses opening alongside established community institutions. The building itself was a beautiful example of early 20th century architecture, its brick facade and detailed metalwork requiring restoration, but fundamentally sound. Standing on the sidewalk outside the vacant property, I could envision the transformation possible with careful renovation and appropriate tenant selection. The large windows would provide excellent natural light for residential units, while the ground floor could accommodate small businesses that served the local community. My phone rang as I was photographing architectural details for later analysis. Amanda's name appeared on the screen, and I answered while continuing my examination of the building's exterior condition. Maya, she said, her voice carrying excitement, I just had the most interesting conversation with Michael Sterling. He wants to discuss a major opportunity that could benefit both our businesses. What kind of opportunity? I asked, noting areas where the building's brick facade needed repointing. Sterling Marketing Group is considering expansion into real estate marketing services, Amanda explained. Michael thinks there's growing demand for specialized marketing support for property developers, and he wants to explore whether you might be interested in being a founding client. The proposal was intriguing from several perspectives, offering potential marketing expertise for my development projects, while creating new business opportunities for Amanda's company. However, it also represented exactly the kind of family business overlap I'd been trying to avoid. That's an interesting idea, I replied diplomatically, but mixing family and business relationships can create complications we should consider carefully. I understand the concern, Amanda said, but think about the strategic advantages. Sterling's marketing expertise could help you develop a public profile around sustainable development and affordable housing. You could become a recognized thought leader in responsible real estate development. Her suggestion aligned with thoughts I'd been having about sharing my development philosophy with other investors and developers. The success of my portfolio had created opportunities to influence industry practices toward more sustainable and community-focused approach. Let me think about it, I said, taking final photographs of the Oakland building before returning to my car. There might be ways to structure a professional relationship that benefits both businesses without complicating our family dynamic. The drive back to San Francisco provided time to consider the various opportunities that had emerged since revealing my financial success. Patricia's affordable housing partnership, Michael Sterling's marketing proposal, and the potential acquisition in Oakland, all represented ways to expand my business impact, while maintaining the values that had guided my development philosophy. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from David, asking if I'd be available for dinner later in the week. Your mother and I have been discussing your business, and we have some ideas we'd like to share. The text represented yet another shift in family dynamics, with my parents now viewing me as someone whose business deserved their attention and input rather than someone who needed their concern and guidance. The change was gratifying but also required adjustment, as we all learned to navigate new roles and expectations. Evidence and validation flowed naturally into deeper conversations about what my success meant for our family's future. During our dinner later that week, Linda and David shared their pride in my achievements, while also expressing hopes that wealth wouldn't change the values and relationships that had always been important to our family. Money can provide opportunities, David observed over dessert, but it can also create distance between people if it's not handled thoughtfully. His comment reflected wisdom gained from decades of managing other people's finances and observing how wealth affected family relationships. The transition from modest living to financial abundance
required careful navigation to preserve authentic connections, while embracing new possibilities. I want to use success to strengthen relationships, rather than complicate them. That's part of why I've been hesitant about making dramatic lifestyle changes, or getting involved in business relationships with family members. Linda reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Whatever you decide about business opportunities or lifestyle changes, we hope you'll remember that our love and pride don't depend on your financial success. We're proud of who you are, not just what you've accomplished. Her reassurance provided emotional grounding that I hadn't realized I needed, confirming that family support wasn't conditional on continued business success or particular lifestyle choices. The fear that wealth might create expectations or obligations that would compromise my independence seemed less significant when balanced against genuine love and acceptance. As we concluded dinner, Amanda raised her wine glass in a toast. To Maya, she said warmly, for showing all of us that success can be achieved without compromising authenticity or values. The toast felt like recognition not just of my financial achievements, but of the principles that had guided my approach to business development. Success measured solely in monetary terms had never been my primary goal, but rather the foundation for creating something meaningful and sustainable. Relationship recalibration required ongoing effort from all family members as we adjusted to new dynamics and possibility. The revelation of my wealth had eliminated old patterns of concern and advice giving, but it had also created opportunities for collaboration and mutual support that required careful development. Amanda and I began meeting monthly to discuss our respective businesses, sharing insights about client development, operational challenges, and strategic planning. Her marketing expertise provided valuable perspective on how to position my development projects for maximum community impact, while my business experience offered her ideas about entrepreneurial opportunities and long-term wealth building. Maya, she said during one of these conversations, I've been thinking about your affordable housing partnership with Patricia. There might be marketing and community engagement opportunities that could help these projects succeed while building awareness about sustainable development practice. Her suggestion reflected the kind of strategic thinking that made our collaboration valuable, identifying ways to leverage her professional skills in service of my community-focused development goal. The possibility of working together professionally while maintaining healthy personal boundaries seemed increasingly achievable. My parents also found ways to contribute their expertise to my business activity. David's financial background proved invaluable for analyzing complex development projects and financing structures, while Linda's organizational skills helped me develop systems for managing the administrative aspects of property ownership. You've built an impressive business, David observed during one of our discussions about expansion opportunities, but growth will require more sophisticated financial planning and operational systems. His advice came from decades of helping other business owners navigate similar challenges, and his willingness to share that expertise, without trying to control my decisions, represented exactly the kind of family support I'd been hoping to achieve. The months following our revelation dinner brought steady progress on multiple fronts. The Oakland Affordable Housing Project moved forward with Patricia's partnership. Sterling Marketing Group began developing specialized real estate marketing services, and my relationship with Amanda evolved into genuine professional collaboration alongside our sisterly bond. Leadership and legacy building emerged as natural extensions of my business success, creating opportunities to influence industry practices, while supporting other entrepreneurs who shared similar values. The wealth I'd accumulated provided financial security, but the more meaningful achievement was demonstrating alternative approaches to real estate development that prioritized community benefit alongside financial return. Speaking opportunities began arriving as word spread about my development philosophy and business results. Local real estate associations invited me to share insights about sustainable development practices, while business schools requested guest lectures about entrepreneurial real estate investment. Maya, Patricia said during one of our partnership meetings, your story could inspire other young developers to consider community impact alongside profit maximization. Have you thought about writing or speaking more publicly about your approach? The suggestion aligned with increasing recognition that my business model could serve as an example for others who wanted to build wealth through real estate investment, while while maintaining social responsibility. However, public visibility also meant accepting attention and scrutiny that I'd been deliberately avoiding. "I'm willing to consider it," I replied thoughtfully, "if the platform could genuinely help promote better development practices." The decision to accept limited public speaking opportunities led to invitations for conference presentations and industry panel discussion. Each appearance reinforced my conviction that responsible development practices could achieve strong financial returns while creating positive community impact. Success stories from my affordable housing partnership with Patricia attracted additional attention from investors and developers who were interested in similar approaches. The projects demonstrated that quality affordable housing could be financially sustainable while providing genuine value to low-income families and surrounding neighborhoods. "What you and Patricia have accomplished challenges industry assumptions about affordable housing development," noted a conference moderator during one panel discussion. "Can you share insights about how other developers might adopt similar approach?" The question provided an opportunity to articulate principles that had guided my business development: thorough market research, community engagement, quality construction and design, and long-term thinking about property management and tenant relations. Sustainable development requires accepting lower short-term returns in exchange for stronger long-term performance, I explained, but the financial results have consistently validated this approach while creating positive community outcomes. These speaking opportunities led to consulting requests from other developers who wanted to incorporate similar principles into their own projects. The additional income was welcome, but more importantly, the work provided leverage for promoting responsible development practices across the industry. Amanda's marketing expertise proved valuable for managing the public profile that developed around my business philosophy. Her strategic thinking helped me accept speaking opportunities that aligned with my goals while declining requests that might compromise my privacy or authentic message. "Maya," she said during one of our planning sessions, "you've developed a powerful platform for influencing real estate development practices. The key is maintaining focus on community impact rather than personal promotion." Her insight reflected the careful balance required for using public visibility constructively while preserving the values and relationships that had always been most important to me. Success had created opportunities for broader influence, but those opportunities needed to be managed thoughtfully. Wisdom and reflection came naturally as I observed the transformation in my family relationships and considered the broader implications of my business success. The journey from secret wealth accumulation to genuine family connection had taught lessons about independence, trust, and the true meaning of achievement. The revelation dinner at Chez Laurent had been a turning point, but the more significant transformation occurred gradually as we all learned to appreciate each other's strengths and support each other's goals. Amanda's initial shock at learning about my wealth had evolved into genuine pride and collaboration, while our parents had moved from concern about my direction to active support for my business philosophy. "Maya," Linda said during a recent family gathering, "watching you build something meaningful while staying true to your values has been one of the most inspiring experiences of my life." Her comment reflected the deeper satisfaction that came from authentic achievement rather than external validation.
The wealth I'd accumulated was certainly important, but the greater accomplishment was demonstrating that success could be achieved without compromising principles or sacrificing relationships. The business continued growing steadily, with new property acquisitions and development projects expanding my portfolio, while maintaining focus on quality and community impact. Each project reinforced lessons about market analysis, community engagement, and the long-term benefits of responsible development practices. Financial security had provided freedom to pursue opportunities based on their potential for positive impact, rather than solely their profit potential. The affordable housing partnership with Patricia generated lower returns than my commercial projects, but the community benefits and personal satisfaction made these investments among my most menial. Looking ahead, the possibilities seemed endless. Real estate development would remain my primary focus, but success had opened doors to philanthropy, mentorship, and industry leadership that could extend my impact far beyond individual property transactions. Amanda and I had discussed the possibility of establishing a foundation focused on sustainable development education and affordable housing initiative. The combination of my real estate expertise and her marketing skills could create programming that influenced industry practices while supporting communities throughout the Bay Area. We could create something that honors Grandma Elena's legacy while addressing current housing challenges, Amanda suggested during one of our planning conversations. Her vision connected my business success to family history and values in ways that felt both meaningful and sustainable. The immigrant work ethic and community focus that had shaped our upbringing could guide philanthropic activities that used wealth for genuine social benefit. The transformation from hidden success to authentic family connection had required courage, vulnerability, and willingness to abandon patterns that had provided security but limited genuine relationships. The process had been challenging but ultimately rewarding in ways that purely financial achievement could never provide. Standing in my Rodriguez Tower office, looking out at the city where I'd built my business, and the Bay where my grandparents had arrived decades earlier seeking opportunity, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. Success wasn't just about proving skeptics wrong or accumulating wealth, but about creating value that extended beyond personal achievement to benefit families, communities, and future generations. The story that began with Amanda's shock at learning I owned the building where she worked had evolved into something much more significant: a family's discovery that different paths to success could coexist and strengthen each other, and that authentic achievement created opportunities for connection rather than division. Sometimes the most satisfying victories aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that emerge when we finally trust others enough to share our truth. The reveal of my hidden success had been dramatic, but the real transformation occurred in the months and years that followed, as we all learned that genuine accomplishment was measured not in dollars accumulated but in relationships strengthened and communities served. The future held infinite possibilities, grounded in family love, guided by values inherited from previous generations, and dedicated to creating opportunities for others to achieve their own versions of authentic success. That understanding was worth more than any building I could ever own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.